Hello, nice to see you all here, and I'm really excited and humbled to see how many people are interested in ensuring the quality of art when you are not an artist and you can paint, but you are a producer, so you have an enormous impact of what the pipelines of art would look like. So, trying to check if that works, and it seems not. Or the secret of technology is to switch something on. So yeah, this is me. And these are some stuff about me, but you've already heard it, so let's skip this slide. And now, the secret of that title, because this is not only a title, this is also a plan of my presentation. And as always, the work in creative technologies goes, we start from the end. So let's start from defining what may be considered a AAA game and why this is important in the topic of my presentation. So these are just a few differences, because if the game is bigger, the scope is bigger, the teams are bigger, you need more time, because usually it's like 3 to even 10 years, and sometimes even more. And also, the smallest problems become big problems, and the smallest consequences become very huge consequences. So the delays are painful. If you have a small project and you have like very many problems, 1 month of delay, then it's acceptable in the current world. But if you delay the premiere of a game 1 year, then another, we all know it, we are all gamers, we've been there. Then it's totally painful for the gamers and for the game developers, because it's more time for the project bonus. And what is important in AAA game, since this is a very big world, it needs tons of assets, tons of new ideas, tons of stories, and so on. That's why it's very important to build a world that is modular and is being recycled, because in that case you lower the scope and you need to really think much about giving some variety to the things that are recycled. And very important is optimization since the beginning. So even when thinking about game, you need to think how it will work, because usually in the very early stages, everyone has awesome ideas. And everyone in the team knows that there's that one game he or she wants to develop. And then it turns out we are still not in the future that has the hardware to run it. So I would like to present you how we approached in Dying Light 2 the topic of modularity and recycle. Because here you can see this is totally the same building. It could be used from the same big 3D modules. However, it seems different. And when you play in the city, you very easily see that these are different parts of the old villager. So, to ensure that you have the work, that you will have the work done, you need pipelines. What I showed here is kind of something you all know, because first you have an idea, a cloud, then it becomes a prototype. Then when the prototype proves that this is what we need, this is alphalized, so it can a bit look like what will come. Then there is beta, and beta is usually almost the final, and then gold. And gold is sent to the certification and launched, and everyone is happy, and there then goes tons and tons of work of patching. But if you want to follow it, you need to create a pipeline and stick to it. A first step is to divide game into stages. What I've shown you is just an example. You may have different names, you may have different stages, you may have more of them, or some loops inside it. And you need to set up a clear approval process. And the next slides will be about it. So this is just a draft, because I'd like to give a disclaimer that nothing that I show here are some very strict and detailed information about the pipelines in Techland. This is just how it all could work. It could be scaled, it could be changed, but the overall idea will be as presented in the presentation. So, the most often reviews are by senior or leader of the team. And this is for all of the teams, because if you send every small stuff to the director, director's time is one of the most occupied ones and one of the most costly ones. So it's better to check all this small stuff inside the team. Then, less often, maybe once a sprint, once a week, as you like to call the periods in your project, would be the director's reviews. In Techland, we have a structure where all content and tech teams have their directors who have the role of kind of creative directors who set up the goals for the teams and approve the work done by the teams. Then, once a milestone or any other period that is similar to a milestone, there is a creative or game director's reviews. So it goes even up. And very rarely are the reviews of the main stakeholders, like the C-level or company owners or the main managers. So what is very easy, most important, is that the approval process should be clear and not skipped. So it means everyone needs to know what he or she has to approve. And also, it cannot be skipped. We cannot continue work on something that has no approvals. And it should follow one step after another. And this is just an example of clear review process. It's just defining what scope of work is delivered from whom and given to whom. So for example, small tasks, as I've already told you, go from team to the leader. A set of tasks, for example, a full set of assets or a full set of clothes for the NPCs, for the generic ones. Go to art director. The multidisciplinary features, so for example, these generic NPCs that are using behavior places in the space created from these assets, go to other directors, to the creative director, and the full hub goes to stakeholders. So, since we talked a little about AAA game and pipelines in AAA games, let's go to the quality of art. So, what does it mean? Is it really clear if we can say that the art has good quality? So, to make sure, we need to define those. As there is no universal definition, of course, in the internet there are some, but just logically thinking, the art quality depends on the stage. So what we need to do is to define what art quality are we expecting in the particular art stage. So, these stuff are usually written by art director and leads and specialists. So the people who know best how the work is being created and what could be needed on which step. And of course, the producers overview this process. Then, these apply to every art department. And for example, if we decide that on draft prototype stage, we should not have any assets that are finalized with proper high poly, low poly, and textures in environment, we cannot request it from the characters team, because it would break the consistency and the review process will be very hard. Also, it shows expected quality of specific art elements. Even going into the detail, if that is really needed, because some of the stuff could be elevated because it's the core of the game. So for example, if you do a gameplay-driven game, then the proper metrics and the proper functionality up to the very little detail should be already applied to the prototype. Should not be changed or ignored. When you work, you need to work with the art stages. You cannot go further you cannot do less, because then the work wouldn't be done. It must be merged with a full game production pipeline. So what I showed you before. So if we have a pipeline which says that game in alpha is playable, roughly looks the same of what it could be, and also presents the full idea for the game for every department, then the art stages should support this and not work independently. And not every art stage is applicable when doing DLC updates for the released game. Because usually when doing additional content, you do not create it from the scratch, but you try to reuse as much because of, modularity. This is the example of art stages. It is kind of inspired by what worked in Dying Light 2, but it's more goes into detail. But what is important here, don't look at those small letters if you don't see it. If you need, I will send it to you. But we have the stages: mood, concept art, reference, prototype, executive concept art, art first pass, art second pass, concept art, paint over. Let's say those can be totally different in other projects. But what do we need? What is this? This is the clear example of what is needed at that point. So what is the deliverable? What is the purpose? So how it will be used? If everyone knows what needs to be delivered and what is its goal, it's easier to provide this. Does it apply for base game and DLC? For example, moods, prototypes, executive arts, first pass, art second pass are for both, but you don't need to do a paint over if you already have a set quality of art, because you've already released the game. You need the information who provides which deliverables, because sometimes that could be anybody, like for the mood or references, but in terms of prototype and concept art, these are the specific teams who also decide what should be there and who have the full ownership over that. And you need to write who gives the approvals for each of these categories, because it's not always the same. Let's now concentrate on the beginning of this process, so mood, concept art, and prototypes. So MOODARTs are rather quick, but rather is very important here, because if you're looking for an idea, preparing of one MOODART can be very quick, but painting tons of MOODARTs to finally see the idea can take a long time. May include high-level or low-level scope, so it means it can be the whole topic, for example, a lighting in a location, the mood of it, how the player should feel there, or it's only a composition of assets. Can be just a sketch. Yeah, sometimes the MOODARTs, if you don't need the information about the color, can be black and white, especially if that is exploration. Can tell a story, because the MOODARTs are often used to show the story, the environmental story that should happen there. And everyone from the team can do it. But of course, if you require the best art, you should assign artists to it. And this is one of the examples of the MOODARTs, of the sketches that were the exploration of a style of a windmill. Maybe, I suppose, some of you played Dying Light 2, especially that I see some people from Techland, so I'm sure that at least some of you played Dying Light 2. And I think you remember a mission where we blow up the big windmill. So it's the very important moment. So we took a lot of time to find this best silhouette of that. And we did. And not only this is the most important architecture of the first region, but also this painting was so awesome that it gained the most important concept art award in the world. So it was worth to take this time to explore this. The other way of finding out what the game would look like is preparing the reference boards. This could be time-consuming as you are searching, and the process of searching really depends on when you find what you are looking for. And usually, you are looking, well, on the internet, as we all. It's very easy to cut, to change, to modify the idea, but if you already choose the right references, it is very costly to fix later when they are already put into production. Having the references, especially the ones to the real world, support the game consistency and player experience. Even if you're doing a totally fantasy game in a world that doesn't exist, player needs some hooks to recognize at least some basic patterns of the real life. This is also a way to show everyone what to expect before investing more time and money. Yeah, usually, someone has the idea, so it's easier to show it than to describe it. And it's the first step while agreeing on art goal with other teams, especially if you don't have the MOODARTs, or it could be added to the MOODART. So this is how you should feel, and this is what you should see. Just like MOODART, it goes from high level to small topics. The base of references can be updated until the late stages of the project, but with thought. And it means that all the further references should expand the ideas you've already had and not create new ones, because it's a clear way to overscope the game. But the reference boards are also very risky. As you can find them in all internet, it can lead to repeatable ideas, because if you have some idea, you may get hooked on some very particular idea and all the time go to it, and it may really affect some new thoughts. And also it is risky, because if you get a reference of the real-life project, then it goes into production and someone does an asset from it, it may turn out that it is illegal, because it is from the real-life photo, and the asset that was put there really exists in the real life, and then you release the game, you're happy, and the company that is producing the tires calls you and says that you are using their tires, and therefore you need to pay them a lot of money. This is just an example, theory. So, this is how the reference boards could look like. Here is the addition, because this is the screenshot of what the Prolog villa looked like in the very first steps of production. And there are the references on what we base some parts of this environment, with the explanation of what is important on these graphics, because what is also very important in references, you cannot just give a picture. There are tons of stuff on the picture. You can see the picture itself, the composition, the colors, the patterns, and not everything is always needed from that. And here you can see the screenshot from the final game on how these references were brought to the game. So there is some twist from the uniqueness of the world and of the game, and saying that this is from this particular game, but the overall space is based on those from the references. Here's another example. This is the inside of this Prolog villa. And here this is a different approach, because you have a full view, and here are the leading references to particular parts of this screenshot. And this is from the other angle, but it's the same space, how it looks in the final game. So when we know what we should do, we should start doing that. And the best way is to start from prototyping 3D models in terms of environment, but it could also be scaled to the characters, from preparing the prototypes of the characters. So the prototypes are usually quick and cheap to iterate on. And if they are not, then they are not proper 3D prototypes, as the prototype should take from 2 hours to half a day for a very big asset, and up to 2 days to very full, big architectural set. If it doesn't do so, then it's not a prototype. It is created not for looking beautiful, but for testing and verifying purposes. If that is the asset we want to have in that game, if that is the proper size, if that should be placed there in terms of composition. It is best if based on placeholders. For example, you have an asset that the player will interact with, or the AIs will interact with, then it's better if the gameplay team or level design team or the team who uses these assets prepare some placeholder, send it to 3D team, so the 3D team knows what are the metrics and what are the non-changeable properties of the assets, so they can produce a prototype 3D model. They may fake being as heavy as final assets, because it's one of the main mistakes when doing a big game. You create tons of 3D prototypes. They are lightweight. You put them on the scene. Everything runs smoothly, even on PS1. And then when you try to launch it on lower-end computer, when you have already the final asset, it looks like the whole design of the space totally goes to trash, because no one thought about how heavy those assets will be. And what is very good, if you already have a prototype 3D model, you have the concept art, you can finalize it in-house, or if you have too small team or many projects, you can also prepare this as packages for outsource. This is the example of the 3D prototype of some assets that was used for hiding and for adding context in some part. Those are building parts, so basically just left from the old world. So now we have all of it. We can go to the next steps, like executive concept art, and finally the first art pass. executive concept art usually takes a lot of time to prepare, and this is very important for all producers, as when people are not artists, they think, oh, it's an image, really. How hard is it to do an image? But to do a proper executive concept art, you need to do tons of research, tons of checking, of imagining what questions would be, finding the answers, presenting it so everyone understands it, and also doing it in such a way that everyone imagines the same thing. So it takes a lot of time. So if the artist says, I need 2 weeks for that, really believe them. They usually need 2 weeks for that. Spares time for the following tasks. When we already spent a lot of time to prepare executive concept art, we don't need to spend additional time to find the bugs, to repair them, and to go on iterate process. As when the executive concept art is done properly, there is no need for that. If the artist who prepares the final assets, just go with this. There are many questions answered and less risk of misunderstanding, what I just told. And it is very important in case of custom, non-referenceable gameplay interactive assets levels. So even though Dying Light 2 is a game that was set in the real world, we had infected, so zombies, so it was not real life. And also in real life, we don't have makeshift weapons that we kill everything out of the streets with. So there were some things we needed to work on. And also the executive concept art can present single object, sets, scenes, basically everything. And that is an example of how the executive concept art for those boxes shown before looked like. And also, I need to mention that this here was the main prototype, the existing deco group. It was painted over that way, and based on this executive concept art, were prepared those prototypes I've shown earlier. And now you can see how it was finalized. So here we have final textures, and this is how this asset looks like in the game. The other way of working of concept artists is not only imagining the assets, but also the scenes. So here, although it looks like the screenshot, it's really a concept art paint over. And the setting up the location, because in that case, the screenshot was made with the assets placed on the map. And then it was painted over. There were some assets added here. So the 3D artists knew what is needed, and level artists knew how to set up this scene. I don't have a screenshot of how it looks in the game, but I assure you it looks totally the same. So there was no sense to put it. So let's say we are still in the process. We have the prototypes. We have the concept arts. We should do a first art pass. This is just to mock up function, identity, no extra details. It's just, if we want to know we are in the house, we shouldn't have 4 boxes, but it should, now at that point, but we should have something that when you close your eyes, it looks like the home. It should only contain base geometry and composition, basic deco groups. So for example, you have a forge and you need something that will show it. So for example, fire there. So you put it. And needs to be very optimized. Once again, think about map structures since the early beginnings. It can be done on visual-only locations, so where there is not much gameplay, stealth, quests, dialogues, and so on, or after the level design blockouts are approved. And sometimes it can be connected with visual exploration. So the task for the first art pass is not to do something that will be final in-game from the beginning to the end, but it's more like the exploration. You prepare one version, check it. If something needs to be changed, then you just iterate on it. And it can result in requests for 3D assets, because even the best concept artists cannot really predict what exactly the base of assets could be, so it's the work of all art departments. And this is the villa we've seen before. I really love that villa, that's why I show it so much in so many slides. And this was the first art pass. When you see it's a kind of villa, there's a kind of deco here, and how the space is organized, and that is kind of in modern style. But when the second art pass, the final art pass came, we added some storytelling here because there was a party. We added some stuff that is very specific to the game, and that's why it looks like this. So when you have the seal of approvals for all the previous steps, you can go to the final stages. And in the final stages, you start with preparing the final 3D models. And you need to understand this is a very long task and very expensive. This is the longest task that the 3D teams, both characters and environment, could have. So the preparing of the final 3D model usually has 3 main stages, but of course there may be more. It's good to review on every stage because when working on such complex stuff, there is place for mistake everywhere. Also should be planned up ahead because it's one of the longest processes in game creation. So you don't wait until you have the full game built to start with finalizing the 3D assets, but you start as long as you have a safe topic that will stay in the game, so it's worth to invest to it. And the detail on final 3D models depends on the context and repetitive usage of the model. So if something is generic, it should be cheap, easy, and not consume much time, but if this is a hero asset, it should be like, it could be a screenshot to some ArtStation or others. This is an example of the final asset that was also a traversal helper, and these are the climbable radio towers in Dying Light 2. And the other parts of those. And when you have everything, you have the final 3D assets, you have, well, everything set in stone, there comes the time for final art pass. And it's also the longest task for level art, and final art pass uses mostly 3D and 2D assets, and it is based on placement of decoration and purely visual beautification. I don't know if that word exists, but I like it. And those visible improvements from day to day increases the full team's morale. And this is because all of them for a few years were doing a game based on boxes, on placeholders that didn't make sense and didn't look like a game. And finally it starts to take shape and they see their things, their ownerships, and it's really a beautiful process. All the mistakes in design and decisions found now are most costly and most difficult to fix. Because the later you find a bug, the more costly it is. And when you find out that, oh, we cannot have that location when that location is already after the final art pass, then, sorry, there is a ton of money that went to trash. And more decoration can cause huge performance regression. So you need constant control and testing, and optimizing. And something stopped working, but it is now, so you can see now. This is also a decoration organization proposal by Concept Art, but it uses already those final assets in the right environment. So, a few tips about work organization. Always remember to give creative artists ownerships over the full topics. Because if they understand the topic, they become expert at it, they give heart to it, it's really not a good thing to take it from them. Decide on who to assign to the task, not only looking at backlog, but also consider artists' skills and personal preferences. If you are working with something that requires your idea and you like this work, you like the topic, you feel it, you will do it far more better than someone who just does this because he needs to. Consult the assignments with art leaderships and specialists because they best know what are the capabilities of the team. Never, ever change the owner of a topic unless there's no other way. Like someone doesn't do a good job, but he or she needs to know about it before taking the topic from him or her. Or if someone leaves the company and you need to find someone who will take over the topics. Take care of communication between owners on every art stage. Remember, they not only work on the project, they not only report time to the JIRA, those people do art, they think, they find ideas. So anytime you could help with communication, with organizing the documentation, just do it. And the best solution of taking care of communication is to create the strike teams, where are people from all the departments who can work in more agile form. So every of them could bring some new feature or new location or new quest and so on, just working together. So when we are already past it, we are going to the functionality. So what does it mean that something is beautiful and functional? It means it works. And really, not even the most beautiful art can be applied to a game when a game is not playable. What would you do if you had a wonderful game that didn't run on your computer or just crashed after a few seconds? You won't look at this game as a beautiful game, really, because you won't have a chance to see that beauty. What is important, artists must play the game and test their work. Even if they are not gamers, even if they say they don't have a time, you need to at least organize them an hour in a week so they could play the game, see how their environment, their characters, their design affect the game, because it's easier to have a full scope. And basically everyone from the game dev company should play the game they are doing. And gameplay and level design traversal sets are saint. This was very important in terms of Dying Light, because player can go anywhere, can interact with most of the environment, meets tons of AIs that also need a space to live, and everything needed to be in the metrics, because if it wasn't, then the whole process went from the beginning. Player must move around, and so must the AI, so watch out for navmesh. And I know the poles on the road are a very important thing of the streets, but if you put them in a game and the AI blocks on these poles, maybe sometimes it's better to resign from some realistic stuff. Player can't enter any place if not the right moment of the story. That is most painful. You do wonderful, true, real environment. Everything looks like in the real life, and then you have to place a big wall around the hub because it's not a moment where a player needs to do this. If you don't do this, then the level designers put their invisible dummy boxes, and they really don't like to do it. NPCs need to have the possibilities to do their usual stuff. So if you have the NPCs who work during the day, sleep during the night, you have to think about how to prepare the environment so they can go to their place of work, use some stuff to do some work, to be a complete part of their society, because who likes NPCs that are not worth for the society if the game is post-apo and everyone needs to do their work? And when they are going back to sleep, they need to have beds on which they can lie on, because if not, they will just stand in T-poses, and who likes to sleep in the T-pose? And test, never stop testing. Sorry, I think that testing and optimization are a crucial part of art, and no one tell me this is otherwise. What is important then when thinking about functionality? All the dependencies. Because in AAA games, it's extremely rare that the art exists only for itself. It exists to support something. So what comes before, what goes after? Those are the dependencies. They need some good communication. There could be tons of very big problematic stuff if that is not handled properly. And forgetting about dependencies can make the time of production longer. So now let me tell you a story, an electric box story that will show you that even the smallest dependencies can cause tons of problems. Look at this. This is a box. It opens, it closes, it had some wires. Very easy one prop, right? In Dying Light 2, it was used as a tool of launching some AC/DC into the infecteds. So the dependencies are like that. Gameplay design does gameplay prototype, as I told you before. Level design propagates it on the map, makes sure it works, and set up the environments. Concept art looks for references, does the MOODART of how it should look like, what should be that object. Sometimes it's very easy, like with that box, and sometimes it was a really very hard task. All the information about this box, like we have a box, goes to 3D art, FX art, and sound design. 3D prototype is created, it is done based on the gameplay prototype, it is being tested. Then goes the executive concept art, we have the final asset, and VFXs, SFXs are being added. Final functionality gameplay tests are done, and we have a working combat helper. But really, if one step is not approved, all the rest, if we continue with that, will be obsolete. If gameplay prototype is wrong, surely the 3D prototype will be wrong and it won't work. If the references lead to the wrong idea, so for example, this box just launches fire into them, the asset also will be wrong, and all the time spent on doing that will go to trash. If the asset is wrong and still no one notices, it will be finalized in the wrong way, and you remember this process is the longest one. And if there are mistakes in executive concept art, for example, color is not proper, or the metrics are not proper, or there is some missing wire that is required there, the asset will have wrong properties. And if there was no previous request for SFX, VFX, or other teams, they won't have time to do that task and imagine an electric box with no sound and visuals. And now my favorite topic, as you've probably seen, so the optimization. If the game is not playable, there is no game. Know the capabilities of your technology. Even as a producer, you should know what is your engine, what are its best ways to work with, what are the best designs, and what are some stuff that the engine doesn't do very properly, because that way it would be easier for you to plan the work. Set up the limits. Talk with the tech teams and set up how many objects you can have on the scene, how many textures, how much mesh memory, texture memory you can use, how many animations you may have, just everything, so you know what is the max. Have tools that allow the artists to check how much beauty they can add. If they can verify with one click if what they've done is optimized and working, that is wonderful. And I think that it really spares much time on iterating if the artist can already verify their own work in terms of maybe they don't even totally understand every time. And organize the whole production the way that it supports performance. You may, depending on the game, you may use different tools. In Dying Light 2, we divided the map to use similar assets, similar styles per area. That's why one region is classical architecture, the next one is modern architecture. And also we set the rules of proper game file structure, because in that case, it can be then added to the rendering, added to the loading, and the game could be optimized. But if your artists don't work with the technology on finding the solutions of how the game structure would work best for the loading screens, for the occluders, for the number of assets, then you will find a way where you will need a lot of time to fix all these problems. Proper level of distance production and pipeline. All the distant plans needs to be simplified, especially if you have a big open world game. And ta-da, request systematic QA performance tests if you only have such a possibility. So if you have a performance or tech QA in your company, just treat them as the most crucial part of the team that will make the game release in better condition. So, we are left with the word beautiful. And what really does it mean, and why this is important for the game to be beautiful? As in the smaller projects, they can experiment, they can experience new ideas, and maybe sometimes base the whole beauty on one idea. But in terms of AAAs, usually the AAAs need to show with every next one the higher and higher quality of rendering, art, and just visuals, because this is the first thing that players see. So with every next release, you need not only to think about what is currently beautiful and what is considered very good at that time, but you also need to think and be a kind of witch who looks in the future and sees what will be beautiful in the few new years. So that is all. Thank you very much for your patience in sitting here and listening to me.
Thank you, Ilya. It was very interesting to see all your presentation, to see your slides. Now it's time for questions from you. So let's start with a question.
Thank you, very great talk. And if there's any example of when we lose QA to production or to any department, and we not should be only sad or happy, you're the biggest example why I should be happy, because it's awesome work that you do. And I really love how you don't compromise on quality in your pipeline. But as a fellow producer, I start to sweat on seeing how costly the whole process is. So can you tell me how you avoid waste in that process, so the work that gets burned because of changes that happen naturally in game dev, and do you track how much waste that process you created generates, if at all?
So the first thing, sometimes you may react to it by using the modularity I've told before. So for example, you have an asset that is being done. So if you have some new ideas, you can try to use it, to change the skins, to change the textures on it maybe, and not do another stuff. Or maybe do some patchwork, connect some things, but use the base you already have. But of course, people are people, and the higher they are, the more ideas they have, the more ideas will appear. So sometimes you have no other means of avoiding this other than writing down every task that is thrown to trash. So for example, if you are doing a quest and it requires unique level, and then this quest is being thrown away, it's best to write down what exactly was in that quest, to copy the prefab structure, to find out the data from the backlog that it took to create this, and present this at the report. It could be weekly report or something. For example, we did that and that work, but that and that was wasted, and it costs that much time. And if people are smart, they will see how much they lose. So it's not only you who should see this.
Thank you. Any more questions?
You don't need to have questions right away. Most probably I'll be at Techland booth, and I'm quite a good POI, so if you see me, just talk to me.
Okay, so if you have more questions in the future, please ask Julia, and she will answer all of them. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Julia, and have a drive.
Thank you.